Johnson. I am a tribal member, the Chokheong tribal member. I sit as an alternate for Gayla Hossett, and I'm here to introduce Mickey Hardnett. I'm going to read his bio, but this is the Technical Assistance to Tribes for Brownfields session. Welcome. Mickey Hardnett, his bio, diverse and extensive experience in assessment, remediation, and redevelopment / reuse of contaminated sites and properties, including Brownfields and Superfund sites. Experience in working with federal, state, and local governments, tribal nations, urban and rural communities. Knowledge and experience of waste management and remediation programs, including multimedia, contaminant, fate, and transport, and expertise across multiple environmental programs. He has conducted training programs, workshops, and conferences for tribes and other communities on solid waste, hazardous waste, and brownfields. He previously was a tribal circuit rider for the U.S. EPA Region 8 and has 25 years with the U.S. EPA in hazardous waste Superfund and brownfield program. Thank you, Mickey.
Welcome to all of you into the session. The last one was real interesting with the RTOC folks. And what I'm going to speak about is providing technical assistance to tribes on brownfields. And I'm going to be here representing a couple of groups, actually. Kansas State University is the home of the Tribal Technical Assistance to Brownfield group. And we also work with the Center for Creative Land Recycling, kind of a sister organization based out of San Francisco. I'll explain more about them. That our function is with the tribal, we call it Tribal TAB, Technical Assistance to Brownfields. It's focused on with tribes, we work with tribes across the country in Alaska, focusing on their issues relative to brownfields. And as Cassandra said, in former lifetime, I spent 25 years with EPA, but I've been working exclusively with tribes on brownfield issues for about 20 years now across the country. And I always like to remind myself that in sessions like this, some words of Sitting Bull, which was, let us put our minds together and see what life we can make for our children. And I think that's what we're doing at this conference this week. And the part I'm focusing on is, dealing with brownfields. And is there anybody here that we're like more of a definition of what is a brownfield? Do you know what one is? The basic explanation is basically what they call real property, real estate, could be land, could be buildings or both, where it have been used by people in the past and it may be contaminated with hazardous substance, pollutants or contaminants or petroleum. And it might be known to be contaminated or it might be just suspected. But because of those issues, people are hesitant to reuse that land or those buildings because of those issues. So the Brownfield program is one that was set up back in the 90s, both not just for tribes, but for all communities to deal with these sort of properties that aren't being addressed by anybody else. And I'll talk more about that. And to do that, EPA provides funds to groups to do technical assistance to brownfields. And there are several across the country. Work with Kansas State University, who has that big purple area in the middle of the country to work with all communities on brownfields, as well as tribes, and also Center for Creative Land Recycling, which has funding to work with communities in regions 9 and 10. So they cover the whole West Coast and work with Alaska. And since we also have a tribal TAB program at Kansas State University, we're working with tribes in all regions, including Alaska. There are some real good folks. Ms. C. Clear, none of them could be here today, so I'm kind of representing them also, but they have a broad range of experience working with communities, dealing with brownfield issues, working with the things related to that, both the technical, the economic and community issues related to assessing and maybe reuse and redeveloping brownfields. But I'm going to focus on the program we do at Kansas State University, focusing on assisting tribes. And there's some key areas that we work on and providing assistance to tribes. Uh, One is, technical assistance to federally recognized tribes, and that includes the tribes and native villages in Alaska. We have a team of professional staff with broad range of experience. Have 128A is that section in Circle of Law that provides funds to tribes and for dealing with brownfield issues and to set up their own programs. I know, like this week, you've heard a lot about treatment as the state under the Clean Water Act. Well, you don't have to go through that with brownfields. You don't have to request treatment as the state, because Congress set up the 128A. It's a state and tribal response program for brownfields. So the tribes were put in the law right from the get-go, equally treatment the states. So in brownfields, you don't have to go through that TAS process. So we have access to a lot of partners, and we don't all live in Kansas, by the way. I live in Montana, live in Billings, Montana, drove down from there. We've got folks in other areas of the country. Our core group is located at Kansas State University, kind of run the program. And we have partnerships with a wide range of folks who know all kinds of stuff. So if somebody has a technical issue or a question, sometimes even bureaucratic issues that we don't know the answer to, we got folks we can reach out to try to get answers. We do work a lot with the EPA regional staffs and try to coordinate what we do with them. And one of the things I also try to do is peer assistance, connecting tribes, and so they can share their experience with each other. As one tribe maybe gets an experience or goes through a process, assessing, cleaning up, or reusing property, and another tribe has a similar problem, then I try to connect them with each other so they can assist each other and share those experiences. We do have a intertribal brownfields working group. We get together and do one of those big Zoom call things about once a month. From folks in various tribes across the country in Alaska. And this is sort of a group who sort of shares ideas, shares what kind of issues are coming up in their part of the country over their tribes. And it's a discussion group and raises, maybe what are the issues that as technical assistance providers, we should be trying to focus on. And all these slides are available, by the way. It's in PDF format you can download. It's on the WAHOVA app as well as the conference site. So you'll have a copy of all these slides. We do participate in a lot of conferences and forums. The Tribal Land Environmental Forum, TLEF, is affectionately known, usually held in August. We're at those every year. And we assist with those and other tribal workshops like this one this week. We also go to the Alaska Tribal Conference in Environmental Management, usually every year. It's one of the ones we participate in, ATCM, as it's known. So there's a lot of ways we try to help folks. Sometimes it's just one-on-one technical assistance. I work with a lot of people just on the telephone, emails back and forth. Sometimes we'll set up a Zoom call with each other just so we can see each other and share information on the screen. So a lot of what I do is actually working with folks on a one-on-one basis, and occasionally get time to actually get out and visit folks in your office, maybe spend a day or two working directly with folks. Obviously workshops, webinars, that kind of thing, various topics. We do have something on our website, and I'll show you that later. It's called Tab EZ, because there's another source of funding for brownfields, and that's the 104K grants. They're very competitive. They're usually on an annual cycle, and everybody competes for those. Tribes, cities, counties, and nonprofits all compete for the same pool of grant money. But right now, that's where the big money is. I'm talking like $500,000, even $1 million to focus on brownfield issues in a community, assessment or cleanup, and other revolving loan funds even. But we do have what's called Tab EZ, and that is it's a format you can download off our website that matches up to the EPA requirements for a proposal for those grants. So rather than starting with a blank sheet of paper, you can go to that and it'll lay out the format for you to start filling in the blanks to fit the EPA format. And that gives you a better head start on those kind of proposals rather than just stare at a blank sheet of paper and say, how do I start doing what EPA is asking for? And I'll show you where that is on our website. We also have what's called the Brownfield Information Tool. And basically, it's a fill-in-the-blank database that you can use for your brownfield sites. You can even use it for other environmental programs. And it's easy to access. It even has a mobile app attached to it. You can access it and enter data from the field. But the idea is you can set up a database and you can include pictures, reports, and detailed information on the brownfield sites you're working on, or even other kind of sites. And the important thing for tribes to know is that database is proprietary to you. Nobody can access and view that data without your permission. The only people that can look at it, you have to go in and actually enter their name and their email address of who was allowed to look at your data. So not even EPA can access it. And I have some that I have access to because they've added me to their list of who has access so that we can get online together when they have questions on how to do things. And especially when you're just setting it up. So I have access to a few because they've asked me to get on with them. But you control who has access to that database. Nobody can look at it without your permission. And that's important because I know sometimes there's properties and sites that have cultural information relative to them, historic information, things like that. And even property, sometimes you haven't even figured out who owns it yet. So you don't want it being out there to the public when you're dealing with a problem that you haven't even figured out who caused the problem. And sometimes it's not clear, even in, reservation country, the checkerboarding and all that, you can find a problem and it may take a while to figure out, but who actually owns that spot of ground or that building. And we do have a forum, which I'll show you an example of, where people can communicate on there and post questions. Other people can answer them, as strictly set up for tribes to use. Now, getting down to the kind of the details, one of the things you start off doing in the Brownfield program is identifying properties or buildings on your lands that may fit the concept of a brownfield. And that's one of the things I spend a lot of time with folks, is identifying where are these brownfields. They may know of a certain property or a house or a building, and they wonder, well, does this fit the situation of a brownfield? So I'll help them figure that out. If it qualifies as a brownfield, it may fit the general concept of a brownfield, but then, like any program, you have to whittle it down to, but is it eligible for the EPA funding or not? Sometimes we have to figure that out as well. It could be a brownfield that for various reasons it may not be eligible for brownfield funding. A good example of that is a Superfund site. If it's on the official Superfund site list and Superfund's going to do it, then we can't put brownfield money into it. But if they're not doing it, then maybe we can. And there's other things like that. And once you figure that out, then one of the next things you do is prioritize. You may have a list of 20 or 30 such places on tribal lands, but you can't deal with all 30 at once. Well, what's the top 4 or 5 you really need to deal with first? And there's different ways to figure out that priority, considering a wide range of things from environmental impact to effects on community health to tribal priorities. Tribes have their own priorities, maybe like with accessing land, or there's land they want to acquire or make use of for various purposes, and that makes it a higher priority than some other area. So help people get through that prioritization process and strategies that fits their needs. And then you go into the basic steps of your top priority sites, maybe assessing them to figure out if they're contaminated. And then you get into the acronym world, like TBA. That's a targeted brownfield assessment. And what that is, for those brownfield sites that are eligible, you can go to the EPA regional office, and they will, instead of having to go use your grant money or apply for a grant, EPA will send their contractor out and assess that property for you using their funds. That's one way to get it done. You can also get assessments done using your tribal brownfield grant funds, or some of the competitive grants to fund assessments. So there's different ways to do it. And that's part of what I help people do, is figure out that, what's the best way to get something done, which funding. Community engagement is an important part of the program. There's 4 basic elements under 128A when they fund the tribes to set up their own brownfield program. And one of those key 4 elements is working with the community, doing community outreach, getting their input and informing them of like the sites that have been identified on tribal lands that have issues, and also hearing from them where they know there's problems out there. You may not be on your list of sites. And then when you do prioritize some sites and figure out which ones are the ones you're going to work on to get them assessed and eventually cleaned up, working with your community to understand and get their input on those priorities, and know when you've got EPA staff or your own contractors or something out there working on a property, and it might be right in the middle of the community. Wonder what are those people doing? You see them out there in funny suits, you know, taking samples, they got bulldozers. What are they doing? So it's best to keep people informed so they know what folks are doing. I always try to tell, if you don't work with your community and make sure they're well informed on what you're doing and what's going on in their community, they will make up their own story on what's going on. And I guarantee you, when they make up their own story, it's much more entertaining than your story. So the way to head that off is do all that outreach. And that's something we usually help with sometimes. I've even gone to public meetings and helped to set them up, helped to organize them and conduct the meetings, especially for folks that are maybe new to doing that kind of thing. And we're sensitive to the issues of when you have community meetings, you know, in a tribal environment, being aware of tribal culture, doing community in ways that are respectful and recognize that it is being conducted in a tribal environment. One of the important things to do, especially with the funding that's become available in this last year and right now, more tribes have funds available to do assessment and cleanup of contaminated brownfield sites. And one of the ways to get that done is by hiring contractors. And actually, I'm going to be doing a session this afternoon at 1:30, going specifically into that process of how to hire contractors to do environmental work. And hiring contractors is a life skill. It's not just a brownfield skill. It's something you can use to do almost no matter what your job is. You have to hire somebody to do work for you. So it's something we help with a lot. We help tribes with getting through that process. There are certain federal requirements you have to meet when you're using federal dollars to pay those contractors. So you go through a process of requests for proposals, competitive bids from contractors, a process to select a contractor, negotiate a contract, then implement scopes of work, work plans, field work, that sort of thing. So I'm going to be going through all that later this afternoon, but that's something we help with. We have model requests for proposals developed specifically for tribes, as well as examples that tribes let us share with other tribes when they've done that kind of work already. Another thing is, yeah, I'm sure a lot of you realize is when you get federal funds, there's always a lot of reporting that comes with it. You know, and there's a lot of reasons for that that you can't get away from. But one of the things we help is we can't write the reports, but we can help review reports, help make sure they've got all the right information in them in the way it needs to be for the program. We know what EPA is looking for usually. We talk a lot with the regional folks. We know what their preferences are, and it does vary from region to region. Some of you may know. So we try to work with them and know what they want, what they expect when they get those reports in, so that we can help people write the reports that EPA is expecting. So we do that a lot. And one of the reports, if you remember Brownfields, EPA headquarters has a database known as the acronym of acres. And it's an important database, but what it is for people who have gotten money from EPA and done assessments and cleanup on brownfield sites, they have to enter into the acres database to document what that money got done out there in the world. And it's important for this reason, is that ultimately the data in that database gets reported to Congress, basically to show them what's been accomplished with that funding that they provided to both states and tribes to deal with brownfields. And hopefully by those reports showing what's been accomplished, they'll keep funding that program And so far in the history of the program, and it's been around since started about 1996, it's been totally bipartisan, supported by both parties. They're relatively speaking pretty well funded, has not been whacked by any of the big budget cuts. And that's because all the politicians see it doing good things in their communities, in their states, in the tribes. And ACRES is the way to get that information to them of what the program's accomplishing. So they keep funding the program. So I like to emphasize that it may be another report that seems like it's another pain, another government report, but ultimately there's a payback, keeps the money coming. There's a lot of other funding out there through other federal agencies, other programs, even nonprofits, a lot of things like that. And we try to keep our ear to the ground with, especially with the nonprofits. They kind of come and go, like mushrooms after a rain, but they're a valuable source of funding and expertise sometimes on specific projects. So we try to keep our ear to the ground of what's out there. We've got folks in our team who used to work for a lot of these agencies. One of the guys in our team was a HUD official for like 40 years. He knows HUD inside and out, and he knows the people. He can pick up the phone and call. So we try to maintain a lot of contact with HUD. I've done USDA grants for tribes. I know how to get that done. And it's not easy, but it's doable. And we try to keep up with things going on in the Department of Energy and Department of Interior. It's a bit of a task in itself to keep up with what's going on with them, but we try. So when people have questions on them, if we don't have the answer, we try to maintain contacts so we can find out who's got the answers. And of course, one of the important things with brownfields is not only just identify them and assess them, but get them cleaned up, with the idea that eventually that cleaned up land and sometimes a building can get reused or redeveloped. And sometimes it may be putting in a new building, just making it available for public use space and even green space. Restoring environment is something Brownfields does. We worked with a number of tribes that have restored green areas, bringing back native vegetation and habitat, even estuary habitats. There's a couple projects on the coast of Washington with tribes. They're about 10, 12-year-old projects now, but they were brownfield funding used to restore estuaries to get some of those treated pilings out of the water and contaminated sediments, those contaminating fish and shellfish. So it's not just dry land, even the estuaries and wetlands have been brownfield projects. Just getting it back to being a nice green space again. There's legitimate reuse, redevelopment. One of our major partners, and I've been doing a lot of work with these folks lately, is the Indigenous Design and Planning Institute at a university in New Mexico. The lead director there is Navajo, Janae professor, and most of the students in his staff and program there are Native American students. And they got some great projects, and they do landscape design as well as architectural and conceptual designs, and work with communities when they want to reuse, redevelop a property. I'm bringing in indigenous thinking and design into the thought process on how to reuse and redevelop property. And so that's their mission, is to do that, bring an indigenous thought process into reuse and redevelopment of things. And in fact, I was with two of them, the director and landscape architect on their staff. 2 weeks ago, we were in Alaska. We were in a remote village in Golovin Bay, the village of Golovin. And we spent a week with them, just learning about their community. We do have some brownfield sites. They also have some severe storm damage from a big storm last fall. It came out of the Bering Sea, sort of whacked them. So they've got issues to deal with. They may have to relocate major portions of their village up to higher elevation ground because of the storms, which is one of the impacts of climate change. But that has a lot of ripple effects to the design and layout of the community when you move it. And they've got, a lot of berry production areas nearby. And of course, they rely on fishing and crabbing and hunting for subsistence. So just moving a village isn't just a matter of picking up buildings and moving them uphill. it's a lot more of a thought process. So these folks are working with them to get indigenous thought process, to get the community involved in that. And we're using brownfields as a way to deal with some of the contaminated buildings that they have there. And some buildings that have been damaged from the storm. We can't deal with brownfields in sort of isolation by itself. They're an important component of the community. So we need to look at the big picture of how they fit into redoing the community. This is what our website looks like. If you pull it up today, it's the address at the top there, ksutab.org. But it is going through a major redesign. So sometime in the next few weeks, if you go to that address, it won't look like this. It's going to look totally different. But I don't know what the new picture of it looks like yet. But this is the way it currently looks. And you can go and it's free to log into, doesn't cost anything. And it's got a lot of our resources information there. You can learn a lot about the technical assistance program, about brownfields, conferences, the grants. There's several drop-down menus at the top. Give you information on that tab easy. I mentioned the format for writing those competitive brownfield grants. And also you can access training. There's training in there specifically for tribes. Hopefully the new website's gonna be a little better organized, but those yellow highlighted areas, those are training, sets of training slides. There's a whole list of them. When you click on that purple line out to the right there, there's a whole list of sites especially for new tribal coordinators learning brownfields. It's kind of meant to be a do-it-yourself training thing. You can go through the slides at your own pace, your own time, and they're designed for you to learn the program on your own time and do it a little at a time. And also, if there's a particular part of the program you have questions on, you can always go back to these, kind of do a refresher. Like how does that part of the program work again? Or what does that acronym mean? It's all in there. And there's, it's divided in tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is kind of for brand new beginners. And tier 2 is for a little bit more sophisticated level of information for folks that have learned the basic stuff and now they kind of want to take it to the next level. And there is a version in here specifically for Alaska, since they do deal with unique issues up there in terms of their relationship to the land, since they don't have reservations like in the lower 48. And so their relationship with the state and federal government dealing with Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act issues, which are hot right now. And all those issues. And so how you implement the brownfield program in Alaska is a little bit different than everywhere else. So there's a set of slides in here when you go to those specifically set up just for Alaska to acknowledge those little differences. When you do log into the website, you can go to the top and there's drop-down menus under these different headings. And just one there in the middle that says online tools. And one of them is the tab easy, the competitive grant format. The next one which says BIT, that's the Brownfield Information Tool, the database. And tab easy is free. That's the one that can, and that's where the big money is right now, the big competitive grants. And quite a few tribes, they just announced them a week ago, the ones for this year. And there were quite a few tribes that got those, and we're talking like $500,000, that sort of thing, specifically for assessment, specifically for cleanups, or sometimes for both. This is the database. You can go use this database for free if you want to use it. But like I said, it is set up so that if you want to use it, you control who has access. You have to go and literally put the names in of who's allowed to go and look at your data. It is pretty handy. It's got fields that look like this. They just fill in the blank. Some fields have been modified over time specifically to fit tribes. Like for instance, it's got things in it now to deal with land that's in trust, in fee, and tribal land, which before it didn't have because it was set up for cities and counties. But now it's got specific boxes to fit, some of the issues that tribes have recording data. And if anybody wants to learn more about it, I can always give somebody a training session on it. And they used to do training sessions on it, the Tribal Land Environmental Forum in August. But that's one of the things I do one-on-one with folks. I just get on a computer with them, we do a Zoom call, and I walk through the screens with them, and then when they're entering data, we can look at it together. That's why they put my name in their list of who has access to the data, just so I can help them do it. And we do have a forum, and it's limited, only tribes can use it, but it's meant that you can go into particular topics. And if you have an issue or a problem, you can go question, you can post it under that particular topic, and anybody else can answer. I might jump on there and say, oh yeah, I know what that issue is. Here's how you deal with that. It might be some other tribes will get on. It's kind of like a discussion line, like on social media. Oh yeah, we had that problem over at our tribe too. And we want to know what the answer is also. Or yeah, we dealt with that too, and here's how we did it. So it's meant to be kind of a discussion forum. And we've built a library in there now. We've got quite a few documents in there as examples that other tribes have said, well, you can take my example, what I did, post it in the library for other tribes to look at. Yeah, see, there's a couple in there in Region 10. And there's some the cleanup plan for the school, things like that. ABCA's analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives. There's a couple of examples of those. One that was done by Pyramid Lake down the road here in Nevada. Notice that we have a lot of partners. Don't try to read all those words, but we try to get partners with people who have knowledge of all kinds of things. So if you come up with a question on, some related topic, we may not have the answer, but we may have a partner who does know that topic, and we can reach out to them and get an answer. And we're always trying to build this list and keep it up to date of folks we can reach out to that have expertise in different fields. But the whole goal of the program, and I know when I started visiting tribes 20 years ago, going and visiting on the res and getting up to Alaska, there was a lot of this sort of thing, a lot of burned down buildings, a lot of abandoned buildings, and all over the community. And we started tackling those using the Brownfield program. So instead of that, which was a very dangerous place for kids to play, converted them into at least a nice grassy play area for kids, and eventually maybe replace it with a new home or something there. Worked with one tribe, they tore down an old tribal administration building that was literally a log cabin with a rock fireplace. It was kind of neat historically, but it was in really bad condition and not safe for people to be in. So we used Brownfield money to get the old building torn down and the property cleaned up. And then they had other funding. They built a whole new, tribal complex on that site. Brownfields won't pay for the new building, but it'll help get that site cleared to make room for the new building. This was a project I worked with Northern Cheyenne tribe in Montana. I started working with them on this site probably 10 years ago. There's a whole story behind it, but I won't go into it now. But it was used to be a store, gas station complex, and a repair shop, and it had burned down. And it sat there for a couple of years. It's just a burnt down mess. And but it belonged to a private property owner right in the middle of their main community. But through getting the property transferred to the tribe and the process of how that gets done, that's what they're now. They've got a little mini mall with a cafe and shops and stuff in it. There's a little coffee shop there in the property. There's a section in the middle that right now is just a picnic area. And then eventually they may build something there. So that's what we're trying to do, is get from the things that used to sit there in the middle of the community that were, a danger to the community and a health risk, to get it back into being used by the tribe, whether it's green space, a new building, or whatever. And CCLRs available to provide a lot of help. A lot of tribes are doing land acquisitions, heard it mentioned here. And that's one thing CCLR is really good at, is some of the legal issues, financial issues, or all the brownfield issues. So when you acquire property, you acquire the property and not the liabilities of any issues that may have been caused there by previous owners. These are my contact information, my email address and phone number. I live in Montana, but I have a South Dakota phone number. I spent 14 years in South Dakota, and I worked at Pine Ridge for a year for the tribe at one time. I have relations on Pine Ridge. And Scott's my co-director. And that's, I put that slide up. I do use those on Zoom calls to remind people I don't live in Kansas. It's flat there. We have mountains where I live. But I think that's just about our time. And if anybody's got any questions or even a comment, any brownfield issues you've dealt with, any questions you have, we can glad to answer them.
I used to be in Brownfields up in the day. Really do all that. Those training modules in the past. Really helpful.
In fact, I'm doing some updates to those modules. You know, world keeps changing. You got to go back in and update it occasionally. And I'm doing that session at 1:30 on the contracting process. The whole contracting course takes a week. I've had that course. If you ever have trouble sleeping, take that course. But I'm going to do, you know, a 1-hour quickie, mostly focus on what's the process in hiring a contractor. And I encourage people to learn that because I say it's a life skill. It's not a brownfield skill or anything else. You can learn how to do processing. You become an asset, not to the tribe, but to yourself. You never know when you have to go through that process to hire, work with contractors. Or you may be a contractor someday. It's good to learn from either side of the process. Well, thank you for coming.
The Albert panel facilitated a facilitated discussion in the main ballroom here at 11:45. And then it'll follow for lunch, which is going to be really cool. Traditional lunch feast buffet with Native American traditional food.
I know there's like with acre,
Yeah,
there's like a whole new thing to it, right? Where it's asking about like not green space, but like something to do with green, right? Where, the projects you take on, do they need to, are they towards this? Maybe not environmental justice, but last time I opened it up, it was a little bit, the whole schema of it kind of looked a little different.
yeah, I know it's got some new stuff, and I haven't seen the latest screens. But we have folk.